The 22nd of February 1943 marked a decade of Nazi control, with Germany striving to dominate every aspect of life, leaving no space for independent thought. On a chilly morning, young members of the resistance group called White Rose stood accused of treason in a packed courtroom in Munich. Their offense was distributing pamphlets that urged Germans to recognize the brutality of Hitler's war. Rather than a just trial, they were subjected to a predetermined display of authority. The judge's commanding voice silenced any effort to defend themselves. Yet the students, part of the renowned German anti-Nazi resistance, known as the White Rose, stayed composed, steadfast in their convictions even as fury and contempt surrounded them. The decision had been made in advance. The White Rose members were condemned to death. Their execution was to be performed by a man who had come to serve as an instrument of Nazi policy, accountable for the deaths of thousands. His identity was John Richards. John B. Richards arrived on the 29th of April, 1893, in the small village of Wickenbach near Wörth an der Donau, then within the German Empire. His family had a grim and unusual profession. For 8 successive generations before him, his forebears had served as executioners. It was a profession that isolated the Richards family socially, but also ensured them a livelihood and a distinctive official standing that few others enjoyed. In 1902, when John was still a child, his father passed away, and he was raised by his mother. After finishing his basic education, he apprenticed as a butcher. When the First World War erupted in the summer of 1914, he was conscripted into the German army and served as a soldier. Like many young men of his time, he endured the brutal realities of trench warfare, but survived to witness the collapse of the German Empire. When the war concluded in 1918, Germany transformed into a republic. The old monarchy vanished, replaced by the democratic Weimar Republic that struggled with severe economic turmoil, political unrest, and a waning sense of national pride. John Richards returned to civilian life and attempted to operate a butcher shop. He married and became the father of 3 children. However, in the early 1920s, the devastating effects of hyperinflation and the economic crisis destroyed numerous small enterprises, including his own. Unable to sustain his family through butchery, he sought alternative means of income. In April 1924, the Bavarian Ministry of Justice appointed John Richards to a grim and solitary role. He assumed the post of Bavaria's official executioner, following the legacy of his uncle, Frank Xavier Richards, who had held the same position for many years. The job provided fixed payments, 150 marks per execution, a daily allowance of 10 marks, and complimentary third-class train travel. Despite these benefits, the position quickly became unstable and uncertain. This was due to a significant decline in the number of executions from 1924 to 1928 within the Weimar Republic, making the job less consistent and more unpredictable over time. In the year 1928, there was only 1 execution performed. This significant drop in activity made it challenging for John Richards to support his family. He sought and received authorization to accept additional work, even beyond Germany, and was no longer obliged to remain in a single location as previously required. Facing economic difficulties in Germany, he abandoned his transport business in 1925 and closed his tavern the following year. To make ends meet, he took up work as a traveling salesman. Ultimately, John Richards attempted to resign from his role altogether. In 1928, he requested to end his contract with the Ministry of Justice, but this appeal was refused. He left Germany and relocated to The Hague, where he started anew as a vegetable trader. For a while, his fresh beginnings seemed promising, and he kept his past identity hidden. However, this concealment did not last long. In the spring of 1931 and once more in July 1932, John Richards briefly returned to Munich to perform 2 separate executions at Stadelheim prison. After his second visit, several Dutch newspapers uncovered and exposed his history as an executioner. The revelations severely damaged his business and shattered his attempt at a new profession. With his reputation destroyed, John Richards returned to Munich in the spring of 1933. As his circumstances worsened, he began to doubt whether he wanted to continue in such a bleak occupation. Everything shifted dramatically for him when the Nazis rose to power in January 1933, rapidly transforming the German judicial system. The new government increased the application of capital punishment to crush political opposition eradicate so-called racial enemies, and instill widespread fear throughout a society. Fresh legislation introduced the death penalty for a broader spectrum of crimes, including acts of treason, damaging military spirit, and other offenses. John Richard's profession as an executioner entered a significant new stage. On the 22nd of June 1933, he signed a fresh contract with the Bavarian Ministry of Justice. This deal guaranteed him a considerably higher fixed yearly wage, now distributed monthly. By January 1934, following additional talks with the Bavarian legal authorities, his income was raised to 3,720 Reichsmarks annually. With his financial situation stable, Richards no longer had concerns about providing for himself. Along with his official responsibilities, Richards became involved in several Nazi groups and formally joined the Nazi Party on the 1st of May 1937. Over time, Richards' execution duties expanded well beyond Bavaria. He carried out death sentences in locations such as Cologne, Berlin-Plötzensee, Frankfurt, Preußischheim, Gordon, and Breslau, the city now known as Wrocław in Poland. Between 1938 and 1944, he also oversaw executions in the Austrian cities of Vienna and Graz. By the conclusion of the Second World War, Richards had executed a total of 3,010 individuals, with 2,951 by guillotine and 59 by hanging. Among those were 250 women. One of Richards's most prominent executions occurred on the 22nd of February 1943. On that day, he carried out the sentence on Hans, and Sophie Scholl was sentenced to death along with other members of the renowned White Rose student resistance group. Later, John Richards mentioned that he had never witnessed anyone confront death with as much bravery as Sophie Scholl did. John Richards also executed members of the Nazi elite who had turned against Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime. Following the unsuccessful assassination attempt on Adolf Hitler on the 20th of July, 1944, the frequency of executions intensified quickly. By the close of that year, John Richards had also been designated as the executioner for the prisons in Munich, Stadelheim, Stuttgart, and Bruchsal. Many of the condemned conspirators met their fate there in the final months of the war. John Richards was known for his thorough preparation before each execution. The condemned individuals were brought into the execution chamber, their identity confirmed aloud, and their sentence read to them. Richards would then lead them to the guillotine, secure them, and carry out the execution. His assistants took care of the body afterward. So devoted was he to his work and loyal to the Nazi regime that he made multiple technical improvements to the guillotines used in Nazi Germany. These modifications aimed to speed up the process of execution and reduce the suffering of those condemned. At the war's conclusion, John Richards was arrested by U.S. Army personnel in May of 1945 and detained at Munich Stadelheim prison for 1 week. Due to his involvement in executing sentences under Nazi justice, he was not allowed to return to any official roles immediately. During the initial months of occupation, numerous former regime officials were detained or prohibited from holding public positions. John Richards was questioned about his role and his awareness of the sentences he had carried out. Ironically, he was then employed by the American representatives in Germany until the end of May 1946. During this time, he executed approximately 20 convicted war criminals at the War Criminals Prison located in Landsberg, Bavaria, Germany. The frequently repeated notion that he instructed American Master Sergeant John C. Woods in the use of the gallows and was hired by the Americans to supervise the construction of the gallows in Nuremberg has been disproved. The gallows construction in Nuremberg was actually overseen by Woods himself. One significant reason for this was that at the end of May 1946, Richards reportedly discovered that, due to mistaken identity, he had executed 2 innocent individuals. From that moment onward, he refused to execute anyone else. Throughout his 23-year career as an executioner, John Richards carried out a total of 3,165 executions, making him the most active executioner of the 20th century. After completing his duties for the Allies, Richards encountered severe social stigma. In post-war Germany, many people regarded him as a symbol of Nazi oppression. In May 1947, John Richards was detained once more. This time he appeared before a denazification court in Munich. In early September of that year, the tribunal labeled him as a major offender and sentenced him to 10 years. Years of compulsory labor in a work camp followed, but this verdict did not last long. In December of 1948, a new ruling lowered his classification to a lesser offense. His punishment was cut down to 2 years in a labor camp, along with the seizure of half of his possessions. Following an appeal, the penalty was further eased to 1.5 years, with only 30% of his assets confiscated. Since he had already spent sufficient time in detention, Richards was released soon after. Richards' lengthy and grim career deeply affected his personal life as well. His profession made him a solitary figure, and his marriage ended in divorce. His 23-year-old son Hans, overwhelmed by the disgrace and burden of his father's involvement in judicial executions during the Nazi period, tragically ended his own life in 1950. Thereafter, Richards lived by himself, with very few friends and even fewer supporters. He spent his last years in poverty, dependent on a modest pension earned from his service during the First World War. In his later days, Richards spoke publicly against the death penalty. Nevertheless, he also accepted honorary membership in an organization that advocated for his reinstatement. His position was complicated, shaped by a lifetime entwined with state-approved killing. John Richards passed away on the 26th of April, 1972, in the town of Dorfen near Munich, just 3 days before his 79th birthday. Thank you for watching the World History Channel. Please like and subscribe, and click the bell icon so you do not miss our upcoming episodes. We appreciate your support and look forward to having you with us again on the channel soon.